There's a lot worth preaching on in today's reading. One particular phrase just really got stuck in my craw, and I could not get rid of it. And it's when Jesus says, unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains just a single grain. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. And what bothers me about this is that seeds don't die when they're planted. They grow, right? Like it's not actually death. I mean, we put this thing in the ground and we cover it over, and the thing that comes next looks nothing like the seed. So we can think of it as death, but it just really, that's just not what's happening. We just aren't seeing something die there. We're seeing a transformation. When the grain of wheat is put into the ground and then the wheat stalk grows, it is the same thing. It just looks totally different. And we have other great examples of this: eggs turning into chickens, caterpillars turning into butterflies. I mean, all of these might seem to be things that one thing has to die for the other thing to come, but really, you know, if you get down to like the DNA of it and the science of it, it's the same exact thing. It just looks completely different. And we have this too, in a way, in our theology about baptism. In baptism, we often talk about how in the waters of baptism we are drowned to sin, and that we die to sin. But of course, I've never heard of an actual death at a baptism. Certainly not the way we tend to do it in our church, which is a little sprinkle on the head. There's very low risk there of actual death. But it is a sort of death that is in fact a transformation from one life to the next. And also, these days, we hear a lot about how the church itself is dying, right? That our numbers are dwindling, our finances are struggling, not just our congregation, but like the church. We see many signs of what might be interpreted as death in many places. I think it was at Bible study Thursday night or book study Thursday night, we were talking, and one of the things somebody said is, you know, the church, like globally, people say is dying. But it's not. It's just the sort of northern hemisphere, Eurocentric, the church that we're familiar with is not doing great. But in the southern hemisphere, the church is exploding. Our own synod in New Jersey is not doing great. And some might say that the ELCA, our church body, is seeing signs of death itself, or at least decrease. And our bishop in New Jersey, Bishop Bartholomew, has suggested that a vision of our future might be moving from 160-some congregations that are pretty much all struggling to having 100 vibrant communities of Lutheran faith in the city, which might sound like a little bit of dying there, right? It's a significant reduction in numbers. And of course, here in our own congregation at Holy Trinity, we worry about our death as a congregation. Last week, after worship, you filled out, or 2 weeks ago after worship, you filled out a congregational survey, those of you who were here, to talk about how you felt about how we're doing in a variety of areas that speak to our vitality, our liveliness as a congregation. And then this past weekend, Saturday and Sunday, the council and I got together and spent some time beginning a process of sort of discerning what our life should look like as Holy Trinity. And we don't have answers yet. But it's a process that we will be working on this year, and then next year expanding to the whole congregation. And so what may be signs of death may actually be signs of transformation. And then, of course, whenever we use the word death, we certainly think about our own lives, right? We all know that death is a part of life. Our family and our friends die. Sometimes it's at the end of gloriously long lives, and sometimes it's entirely too soon. But in baptism, we have been planted in this life as seeds of the kingdom. And we do not die even in our biological death, but we grow into something different. We grow into life eternal with Christ. And in all of this cheery talk of death, there's one final thing about this agricultural metaphor that Jesus offers up that is really important to remember. I grew up, as I think most of you know, in a rural community where there was, I like to say, more cows than people. I think there probably were. But, you know, I grew up in an agricultural area. Lots of fields, lots of farms. And mostly small family farms. But even the way small family farms are run today is far more industrial than the way farmers would have functioned in Jesus' time. We've got machines that, thank God, do a lot of work that used to be, just backbreaking labor for people. But when Jesus is talking about a seed being planted in the earth, he's talking about somebody using their hands to do that. Planting was a personal, sort of intimate experience. That hole was dug by hand. That seed was placed by hand. Maybe not always specifically, maybe scattered, but those seeds were covered much more the way we might plant plants in our garden here at church or in our gardens at home. Somebody's hands are at work in that planting, in that apparent death, and in that transformation. So if we are the seeds that are being planted, if our church is a seed that has been planted, and we seem like we're dying, yet we're actually being transformed into something that may look completely different, then we need to remember that it is God's hand that is doing that work. All of these changes that can be very frightening, disconcerting, anxiety-producing, just bad, for lack of a better word, in the way we experience them, we need to remember that we are never apart from the guidance and the care of our farmer, our gardener, the one who created all living things, who planted everything, who calls us in baptism to a new creation and a new life, to a transformation and growth that conquers any death and springs us forth, blooming into new life. Amen.